Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here on the 200th anniversary of the Cambridge Union. None of you look nearly old enough, and it's a wonder that it continues year by year to provide such a great forum and such powerful debates, as well as tonight's. And I am particularly pleased to be here because I've been told that a prophet is never admired in their own country, and as a fellow of an Oxford college, I thought I'd try my luck with a Cambridge audience instead. So please be gentle. We couldn't all get to your great university, but we are all very privileged tonight to be here to engage you in debate. And we are engaging in debate tonight on the colossal subject that has been the elephant in the UK's political room for much of my active political life, and is now so enormous that at last the public are going to be trusted to think about it, to debate it, and then to make a decision. But tonight we are not debating whether the UK should remain in or should leave. We're not debating what kind of new relationship the UK should have with the European Union as it goes on its wild ride to political union. We are here to debate the central proposition of, is the European Union as a whole doing a good job, or is it failing? And I have no pleasure in moving the motion tonight, but I do believe that the European Union is failing many of its members. It is failing many of the citizens who live within its member states. It is failing many of the member states, and above all, it is failing Europe as a whole. I'm sure our opponents tonight will wish to argue two great propositions. They will wish to argue that our prosperity is in some way dependent or related to the membership of the European Union, and they will argue that the European Union is a way of preventing conflict and war. If only, ladies and gentlemen. But it is our case, the proposition case tonight, that the European Union is damaging our prosperity collectively. It is undermining and destroying our national democracies. It is threatening conflict, tension and disagreement that did not exist before the European Union came along. And because it is changing and undermining people's sense of identity, it is doing that most damaging of things that a political movement or group can do. If you meddle or mess with people's identity, you can unfortunately often bring the worst out of them. You make them feel threatened, you undermine them at your peril, because it can produce conflicts and tensions and difficulties that weren't there before you began. Our prosperity is visibly damaged by the EU and especially by the euro, which is now the central cause and part of the centralising agenda of the European Union. Don't take my word for it. Go and talk to young people in Greece or southern Italy or Spain. 1 in 2 of all those young people tonight are out of work. And they're not just out of work for today or next week or for a month. They are on the scrap heap. They don't think they have a chance of a job. And that mass unemployment of young people, which the UK has managed to avoid by staying out of the euro and the worst features of the economic union, is a tragedy for Europe and a major reason why you cannot tonight vote to say that the European Union is functioning well. When the United Kingdom joined what was then the European Economic Community, we were told we were joining for trade and more jobs. That was over 40 years ago. Over that 40-year period, the European Union has not negotiated a free trade agreement with the United States of America. It has not succeeded in negotiating a free trade agreement with mighty China, the world's second largest economy, and it has not even bothered to get round to a free trade agreement with India. Many countries that stayed out of the European Union now have those free trade agreements with the world's first and second largest economies, and with India, the most populated democracy in the world with great economic prospects. The EU has let us down. Independent nations have been able to do the job where the EU was unable to do so. And if we look at the impact the EU has had upon energy. It is driving people into fuel poverty, and it is driving industry offshore from the European Union, because the EU has put in a set of policies that do not work, that give us dear energy, which give us unreliable energy, which give us interruptible energy, at a time when our American competitors and our Chinese competitors and many other Asian competitors have done the opposite, gone for more abundant, cheaper energy, so they have the jobs, they have the factories, they have the industry, we have the unemployment, we have the problems, and no one has saved the planet because the carbon dioxide is being emitted in Asia and America rather than in Europe. Europe is a disaster from the point of view of the prosperity and job opportunities of the many, particularly in the south and the west of our continent. Worse still, the European Union is so anti-democratic. We have just witnessed the tragic death of Greek democracy. And who would have thought that a group of well-intentioned people, no doubt, who formed the European Union, thought that one of the first products of their euro and their European integration would be the death of democracy in Greece, that cradled it more than 2,000 years ago, that taught the rest of the countries how it could be done, that knew about freedom and disagreement and votes and choice. And what choice do the Greek people now have? They have the choice of which people implement the cuts, the austerity, the economic policy that has been laid down in the European Union and laid down by the Germans who lead the economic argument to such a great extent. Wasn't it a tragedy to see the Greek people vote for an alternative government and then to see that government completely humbled and humiliated? Wasn't it a tragedy to see them vote in a referendum for a different policy and then they were told they had to keep the policy that they didn't like? And then wasn't it bizarre that they ended up voting back the original government, but that original government had done a 180-degree U-turn in order to conform with the European Union? Now, I hold no candle for the Greek economic policy. I don't support Greek economic policies. But what I do know is that Greek democracy has been destroyed. It is dead. It is all over. And if we get dragged into more of the European scheme, if we join them on that wild ride to political union, British democracy will go exactly the same way that Greek democracy has now very visibly gone. We are then asked to believe that the European Union has created the peace in Western Europe. Well, that's not how it looks to most people. The peace in Western Europe after 1945 was created by three things. It was created by war exhaustion after two brutal and disastrous wars. It was created by the fact that we now have a peace-loving democratic France and a peace-loving democratic Germany, and they have no intention of fighting whether there's an EU or not. And it was also obviously created, supported and reinforced by NATO and the American presence in the defense of Western Europe. And because America became the superpower after 1945 with such a lethal controlling arsenal of weapons, there was no way in which the subject countries of the European Union were going to fight each other. They wanted the American umbrella, and America had the power to make sure that things worked as they should. Yes, indeed.
Doesn't that ignore the economic role that the EU may have had in confronting the Eastern Bloc? None of the Eastern Bloc seemed to get mentioned in that speech just there.
Well, I'm just about to go on to the confrontation of the Eastern Bloc, and I think, again, it was NATO which confronted the Eastern Bloc, particularly the United States of America. Europe was impotent when Russia exploited her position in the Eastern Bloc, but we fought and won the Cold War, led by the leadership of Ronald Reagan, ably assisted by Margaret Thatcher. It had nothing to do with the European Union whatsoever. And my final point is that if you meddle with identity, you create potentially a nasty politics. I don't want to live in a Europe where the extreme right or the extreme left are attractive options to people. I don't want to live in a Europe which cannot have a sensible policy on borders or know what to do about economic migrants and refugees or know how to distinguish between them. I do not want to see a Europe bickering about who lives here and who doesn't live here without the gumption and the power and the authority and the common sense to come to decent results. We still live in the age of the member state democracy. The democracies are in peril. The wild-wide political union necessitated by the euro is a destructive force. We must stop it before it is too late.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.